Welcome to our second Brexit reality debate. Now, if you voted Remain, should you fight Brexit or accept it? Have the people spoken, or could they change their minds? Are you sick of the whole thing and want to get on with it? Or are you terrified we are sleepwalking over a cliff? Last week in Wakefield, we brought together Brexiteers. Tonight, in a city that voted strongly to Remain, we've got just Remainers in the Georgian splendour of Bath's assembly rooms. And in many ways, things are going their way. 4 rounds of Brexit talks haven't made huge progress. The government now admits it needs at least 2 more years of transition and is gripped by a leadership crisis after Theresa May's grim performance yesterday. One man who thinks it should be stopped at all costs is Hugo Dixon, the founder of the pro-Europe think tank Common Ground, who believes the public can be persuaded to change their minds.
The government's making a dog's dinner of Brexit. Theresa May triggered Article 50 without a plan. 6 months later, she still hasn't got one. But we're going to get a bad Brexit, not just because May has lost control. The problem is there is no good Brexit. That's why cabinet ministers are fighting like ferrets in a sack.
Try before you buy, free sample.
Don't be shy to have a try.
How are you today?
Nice. Yeah, thank you. I voted to be Remain.
You did vote to Remain. Good man.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm in the middle.
Don't show politics, no politics.
Okay, good to see you.
Take care, nice to see you.
Because I'm a greengrocer, I don't know if it's going to affect all my produce coming in from other countries.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm in.
The only good Brexit was the one based on the Leave campaign's lies. Which lies worried you?
The big thing about how much money would be for the NHS.
The 350 million
bus.
for the NHS.
Which was a complete...
But that's, did you believe that?
No.
Did you believe that? Did you think there was money
I
coming?
wanted to believe it, yeah. You know, you should lie to people, you've got to be honest.
The biggest lie of all was that voting Leave means taking control. As May is humiliated in the Brexit talks, it is becoming clear we will lose control. We will follow EU rules without voting on them. Brexit is already damaging us. The pound has sunk, prices are up, people's incomes are being squeezed. We've gone from being the fastest to the slowest growing economy in the G7. Talented Europeans are quitting in droves. The NHS is struggling to find enough nurses and doctors. And this is just the down payment. We haven't even left. Thanks, Brexiters. Some pro-Europeans think we should push for a soft Brexit, but that's worse than staying in the EU and sitting at the top table. Others think it's undemocratic to keep fighting now the people have spoken.
The things that are being said make it sound like they want to go back to the empire.
It's not coming back, is it?
It's not.
In a democracy, people are free to speak their minds and change their minds. One person, one vote, one time is not democracy. That's how Hitler kept power.
Free sample today, guys, free sample.
The patriotic choice is to fight Brexit. That means changing public opinion, and we haven't got long. But we do have the best arguments. Reality is biting, and the government is on the run. Let's boldly make the case to abandon this mad escapade before it's too late.
And Hugo Dixon is here with us live in Bath. Everybody in this debate, all the guests, voted to Remain, and I will introduce our panel as we go along. But sitting next to Hugo Dixon is Stephen Kinnock from Labour, a passionate pro-European, and yet you and your party want to deliver Brexit. Why aren't you with Hugo?
Well, I campaign passionately for Remain, as you say, and I think that Brexit is an act of self-harm. But what I would say to those who want us to stay in the EU is I think to do that we'd have to have another referendum. And are we absolutely sure that we want to take that risk? Because I think the result of that referendum could well be an increased vote for Leave. because it wouldn't be about the British economy, it wouldn't be about our place in the world, it wouldn't really be about the details of the negotiation. It would be about saying, look at the Westminster elite refusing to listen to the people, and we would have yet again a referendum which wasn't actually about the subject on the ballot paper, and I just don't think we can afford to take that risk.
Why is he wrong, Hugo?
Well, he's wrong in my view because we would only have a referendum to verify whether the people really want to leave if public opinion had already changed. There is at the moment no chance of this Parliament agreeing to a referendum. You will only get that to happen once or if people like us are successful in changing public opinion. If you manage to change public opinion, then we'll win that referendum.
Tony Clark, now you're from Bath Conservative Association, and I should say we spent weeks inviting Conservative MPs to this debate, and we can't find anybody who's prepared to come here tonight to talk about this. But I'm very glad you're here because you were nodding all the way through Stephen Kinnock's answer. You think we should accept this?
I'm a very strong Remainer. I work very hard to get the right vote, as it were, and that's why 70% of the people in this city voted to remain, because a lot of Conservatives voted. However, once the decision was made, the view of our party is that we should follow the people and do what they say, and that's what we're doing, so that we are moving on with Brexit. I'm not suggesting for one moment that the negotiations are wonderful and it's all brilliant, but I do not believe that, first, I think the British electorate is elected out. They don't want to go to the votes again. At the moment, the polls are showing only about 25% of people wanting to remain. If it was another referendum, a very large number of people would vote just to allow it to go through because they're just fed up with the whole thing.
Well, somebody who disagrees with you on the panel is Madeleina Kay. Now, you're a young artist and a pro-EU activist.
Yeah.
What do you think the politicians should do?
I think that the people deserve another referendum on the deal that's negotiated, because the current government is making an absolute dog's dinner of negotiating Brexit. It was an outrage that we were asked in the first place when it wasn't specified what Brexit would involve. Nobody knew what Brexit meant. We still don't know. When we have negotiated the deal and we've got the final deal, the people deserve a right to say whether that's acceptable or not. And if the government have made a complete wreck of it, then we ought to be able to say, no, actually, we don't accept that. And
let me come to you in the audience. What do you think about the idea of fighting it or accepting it?
Well, I think that although as a Remainer myself, I did campaign to remain, I think it's really important now that we actually move on. And I work for a youth engagement charity, and actually what we're trying to do is get a better Brexit for young people. And what we mean by that is actually a Brexit that works for young people. So it doesn't matter now. It shouldn't matter whether you voted Leave, Remain,
what does that mean?
Couldn't vote, didn't vote.
I never know what better
so what
Brexit
it means
is
a Brexit where young people are central to the negotiations. We've been overlooked for too long, and we're producing a report that's coming out, and actually Stephen is the chair of our APPG on a better Brexit as well. And we've got a report coming out that's actually going to bang that drum for young people and say, we need to move forward, we need to mitigate the outcomes of Brexit on behalf of young people, and that's what we should be focusing on, not why or what if. We need to focus on how. How can we do a Brexit that actually works?
Chris Davis, you're a businessman here. I mean, what do you think about fighting it all?
Listen, I wanted to remain, and I wish we hadn't voted to go, but I'm of the opinion that, look, we need to accept the decision taken by the British people in a democratic vote and move on, because I think if we're not careful, we'll end up fermenting. At the very best, we'll look like a bunch of sour losers, and worse, potential civil unrest. And I do worry about that, and I do agree with Stephen that if we have
civil unrest in Bath?
You haven't seen it the weekend. But I do worry that if we end up with a vote for OK, we'll remain, whether or not we go OK, let's make it the best of three, and let's see where we go after that. So I'm not sure where you end up with that.
Let's go to your local MP, Vera Hobhouse. People going to take to the streets?
Absolutely not. I actually have fantastic confidence in the wisdom of the people, and I think it is about persuading. And if I passionately believe, and I have fought, as many people in this room, to remain, I haven't changed my mind so quickly. And I always wonder about people who could say a day after the referendum, oh, okay, let's leave then. For me, it is important to stand up for your conviction and to persuade. And I am convinced that there is still a lot of persuasion that we can go
So what do you say
forward.
to this woman here who says she's fighting for a better Brexit? Are you saying that's not possible? There's no such thing?
Absolutely not. I think it has become clear in the last 15 months, and the stalemate that we're in shows very clearly that the best deal we have is the current deal that we have in the EU. It's a dream to think that there's something better out there. Let's wait and see. I'm happy to wait and see for the outcome that the Conservative government will come up with, and then I will want to put it to the people and say, is this really a better deal, or are we still best off in the EU?
Do you want to come back?
Yeah, I understand your reservations, and I too, I campaigned heavily to remain. But I've gone all across the country, and may I just add, it's really important we try and move out of places like Bath, out of places like London, and actually talk to young people like I have across the UK in places that voted leave. And actually their main concern is not whether we should vote leave, whether we should go back. A lot of them actually voted leave for reasons that, are very different. They have their own issues, and we shouldn't be dwelling on why and how. It doesn't matter to all those young people across the UK. What matters is that we try and do something to get that certainty back, so they have jobs, so that they can feel more certain in their future. And I just don't think that having a debate over, if and what and how is going to help anything. And, we have to focus on moving forward.
Jordan, you're a student. You're nodding away during that.
I am. I campaigned really, really passionately last year for the Remain campaign, and, I was very, very upset the day afterwards. But moving on from the points we've said here, the negotiations may not have been great, but we don't think about the fact that maybe that is because people are trying so hard to hinder everything. And we might get to the end of this deal in a few years, whether it's a transition period, it might be 5 years, a decade, it will happen, and all the people going for the second referendum, all these people campaigning to stay in the EU now, they will look back and say, instead of having a constructive debate and contributing our opinion to how we can make Brexit work, they'll turn around and they will realise that the Brexiteers got all the say, Brexit happened, and the 52% got the say, and all the people who want this second referendum, unlike young people.
Can I just say, on the point of the young people, what about if it takes 2, 3, 5 years to negotiate this deal? What about all the people, all the young people that are now becoming of voting age? Do they not have a say in their future?
Well, let me bring in John Nicholson, who was an SNP MP until this election, but is still campaigning against Brexit. I mean, had you been in Parliament, you'd be doing everything you could to fight this.
Absolutely. I think Brexit's going to be a disaster. And lines from young people in the audience in which they say, we want to contribute to this debate, sounds good in principle, but nobody's listening to you, unfortunately. The people who are negotiating Brexit aren't listening to you. In Scotland, we had a 62-38 vote in favour of staying in the European Union. The Westminster negotiators aren't interested in listening to us. They're not interested in listening to young people. Brexit, sadly, was older voters voting for self-interest and often prejudice against the long-term best interests of young people. And it's clearly absurd to say we agree with Brexit in principle, regardless of the deal. You wouldn't walk into an estate agent and say, look, I'm thinking of selling my house, and then somebody comes back with a ludicrous offer. I know it's hard to imagine owning a house if you're a young person under this government, but say, I promised I'd sell my house under all circumstances, no matter what the offer was. Of course people should have the right to have a say if the deal is as bad as I believe it's going to be.
But what do you think, as someone trying to fight this, of the position of the official opposition? The Labour Party.
I know what the position is. I'm going to listen to Jeremy.
Shall I try again?
Well, but there's lots of different positions. So, Jeremy Corbyn, for example, in the Andrew Marr programme, says that you can't stay in the single market unless you're in the European Union. It's just factually incorrect. I'm very sorry for Labour in lots of ways. It's very difficult because the party is very divided on this. They're trying to listen to the voters, but I think they've got to lead from the front. I think Labour's got to be braver.
But just try for a moment, if we could, to just focus on the how of all this. I need to understand from those who are saying we should stay in the EU. So what you're saying is we need a second referendum. Is that right? We need a referendum to reverse the referendum. how would you say, then you say we need to persuade people. Are we going to use opinion polls, those totally discredited instruments of understanding public opinion, to say now is the time to have another referendum? Or are we going to just say, let's commit to having a referendum sometime in the spring of 2019? On the basis, just one second, Article 50 is the tip of the iceberg. Article 50 is only about Northern Ireland, EU citizens and the budget. There's a million other things in our relationship with the EU.
How then? Just answer the how.
Having a referendum where the real subject isn't the subject on the ballot paper. It doesn't make sense.
My view is that we almost certainly will need a referendum. If we're going to reverse this.
Okay.
But we will only get that referendum if opinion has already started to change. And we will see it, sure, in opinion polls, we'll see it in petitions, we'll see it in demonstrations, we'll see it in lots of different manifestations of the democratic will. And I think that what I wanted to know, frankly, and we don't know, is what does the Labour Party want and what does the Conservative Party want? We're in a position where neither the government nor the opposition can tell us what they actually want from Brexit.
Can I just come to the audience?
Hey, let's have a better Brexit. What is this better Brexit?
So what do you think of this idea?
We don't know from either of these parties what they actually want.
Let me ask the audience here what you think of this idea of a second referendum and what it would deliver. Yeah, the gentleman in the second row there with the blue shirt. Can we get a microphone over to you? Yeah.
Absolutely, it's a good idea to work towards a second referendum. The first referendum, A, it was advisory, B, it was flawed, C, it was only just over a third of the voting people actually voted for leaving, and so 2/3 of the electorate didn't even vote to leave. So absolutely people must be given the chance to reconsider
you think it's a good idea?
Now that we know that all the problems that are arising.
Okay, how about you on the front row?
I don't think it has to be a referendum, but I do think it has to be put to the British people. And what I would like to see, because I agree with everything that's been said by the previous speaker, this is not a game. This is not something we can do on what in effect was an opinion poll. This is something that is going to affect the next generation and the generation after that. And we had no facts during the referendum. I would like to see what is happening being monitored, and I actually think the Labour Party are right to monitor on this. Then I would like to see, let Theresa May have her Brexit election. Let us go to the election.
You think she'll last that long?
And I don't want a referendum. I don't want a referendum. I want a general election where the people have the chance to say on this, as on other things, that they want it or they don't want it in light of the facts being presented.
Okay, well, we've got a Conservative councillor here from the next generation as well. Lizzie, I mean, well, first of all, do you think Theresa May will survive to the next election to see out that scenario?
Well, yeah, I believe that she's doing the best job she can at the moment. I mean, right now there's too much arguing over whether we should have another election on Brexit. I mean, people voted, and I think it's, we have to respect that. If we start overturning one decision, well, what happens if we go for a next one and you go, actually, I'm sorry.
But don't you do that every time there's a general election? People vote, and then they vote again a few years later.
But this is different. This is looking at the country leaving the EU, and we have made that decision.
Forever?
Why are you saying no in the second row there? Yes.
What I don't understand is there is no plan. There is no plan. It's all very well saying we can wait 5 years, we can wait 10 years. We can't. The whole country will fall apart. But there is no plan.
Yes, in the black T-shirt.
I think that's a really good point about there being a plan, because one thing that we're looking at the economy. Everybody, we need to keep the economy strong, and markets need certainty. And the interesting thing about having a plan is referendums in themselves are destabilising. Now, if we're going to go forward with a plan, surely it would make sense that where political parties put forward a programme, of how we remain in the EU or how we leave. So people aren't just voting yes or no; they're voting on a system of ideas. And for me, I think we've just had that general election. The Liberal Democrats stood on a policy largely of Remain. The other two parties, Conservatives and Labour, were parties of Leave, and the overwhelming majority of the electorate has supported the parties of Leave, and we just have to respect that.
Not because of Leave.
John Nicholson, I mean, how undoable is this? I mean, what do you think of this idea of a general election rather than a referendum to solve this.
But that lady there in the front row was talking about a general election to decide this. But the problem is there isn't really any choice south of the border between the two main parties, because they're both calling to leave the European Union. There's a slightly different emphasis, but fundamentally you're not really being given a choice. The Lib Dems
But do you think a general election
could
solve Scotland's problem?
Would it solve Scotland's problem? Well, Scotland's problem can only be solved by the Brexit negotiators listening to us. I mean, we know, for example, that the European Union has said that Northern Ireland is absolutely at the top of its priorities. Now, the Northern Irish have already been promised that there will be a tariff-free relationship with the European Union. The SNP's argument would be, if it's possible for Northern Ireland, it should be possible for Scotland too. We should stay in the single market, because every single political leader north of the border argued that it was vital for jobs and growth and investment.
Stephen Kinnock, Labour wants to stay in the single market for now. Yeah. After this transition period, do you still want to be in the single market?
Well, I think that we should move into the European Economic Area, because people don't quite... I mean, the thing with staying in the single market is you're staying under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. You're not able to reform free movement. Under the European Economic Area, you are. There are articles of the EEA that allow that, and the EEA is not under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. So I think we need to put more flesh on the bones, as colleagues have said, about having a plan, flesh on the bones of what it means to have maximum market access, but also to have clearly moved into a transitional period outside the European Union.
What do you think of that idea? Gentleman at the back there in the jacket.
I'd just say, oh, come on. We are watching a slow-motion plane crash, and time is ticking, and we aren't providing any solutions. We need, I believe, it's all about the role of this country in the world. I want our voice to be part of the debate, balancing Europe with America and with China. We're not even going to be at the table after leaving. And that's not the economic constant. We're a connected world. We should stay connected to it, not turn our back on it.
Yes.
I think there's a very important principle at stake. Everybody in this room voted Remain. We were passionate about it. But everybody in that referendum was clear. Both sides were clear this was a decision. A decision was taken. The leaflet that we all got from the government said, this government will implement your decision. We have something more precious than friends in the EU, something more precious than trade deals. And that's our democracy. And if we undermine democracy by not respecting the decision that was made, then we're in real trouble. That's the most important
That seems to
principle.
have annoyed you.
Absolutely not. Democracy is not a moment frozen in time. It is a process. What would have happened if the suffragettes had given up? I mean, democracy means that you keep working towards a better future. Yeah. And that's what we should be doing.
All right, Tony, yeah, you're trying to get in.
Apart from anything else, we're talking about the negotiation of treaties and the idea that we should have a free-for-all where everyone should be saying, well, this is what I want. This is what that doesn't make any sense in the sort of process we're going through.
That is what your Conservative government is supposed to be doing. It's supposed to have a plan. It's had 15 months. It hasn't produced a single proper plan. Now,
which of the promises?
When it eventually produces a plan, if it ever produces a plan, we need to see, is it any good? It doesn't look like it's going to be good.
Which of the promises made by the pro-Brexit campaigners have been kept thus far? We were told it was all about taking back control. We were told it was all about opening up trade deals. We were told, crucially, that the Germans and the 27 would knuckle under once we started negotiations. The opposite has happened. They remain united, and we're the ones who are having to knuckle under.
Well,
it's the
Hugo
opposite
Dixon,
of taking
the
back
person
control.
who might change this is Boris Johnson, your old school chum, who could yet end up leader of the Conservative Party. Given what happened at the Conservative Party conference. How would that change the debate? Because he will want to move things more quickly. He'll want to be out more quickly. He'll want to cut down this transitional period and be much more hard Brexit.
Well, I must say, I think that what happened yesterday, particularly that disastrous speech by Theresa May, I mean, you can feel sorry for her. I think, though, that actually does change things, and I think that makes things easier for us, for the pro-Europeans, to actually reverse things. Because if, say, Boris became the leader of the Conservative Party, I think you'd have all-out civil war. within the Conservative Party. And I think that the British people don't like what they're seeing. They don't like the fact that they can't make up their minds on anything. And the more that they see this party tearing itself to pieces without being able to reach any decision, I think the more people will be seriously worried that they are actually throwing our future in front of a truck that is going to crush us. And I think that that is actually quite positive. Equally, if Theresa May somehow manages to hang on by her fingertips, she has no authority within the cabinet, and she has no authority within Europe either.
All right, let's hold it there for a moment. We've got to go to a short break, but afterwards we'll be asking how everyone feels now, 15 months on from that vote to leave. Welcome back to the Assembly Rooms in Bath, where we're here for the second in our Brexit reality debates with a panel of politicians and an audience who all voted Remain. Let's talk about how we feel 15 months after this vote. After the vote, Remain has said all sorts of things. You heard, I'm ashamed to be British. I feel as if we've thrown away our future. I feel the elderly have taken away the futures of the young. How do you feel now? Have you kind of calmed down? Can I come to you?
Not one bit. I'm as angry as I was after the referendum. My first reaction was utter despair. Stayed up very late with my husband, woke up, cried. I felt this was not the country. I am an American-born UK citizen, and I was absolutely devastated. And now I'm angry every single day following this debacle that we're witnessing.
Yes, behind you in the black there.
I'm also angry, and I also think that it's. I'm angry because of all the lies that were told. The £350 million for the NHS a week, the fact that the whole electorate was gerrymandered. My 17-year-old daughter couldn't vote because various Europeans living here couldn't vote. All those things that could have swung it so easily, and the fact that, and also that there was no plan. Nobody knew what they were voting for.
Gentleman on the end there, yes.
Yeah, I actually feel galvanised. I was at Labour Party conference last week, and what I was trying to do is get the Labour Party to move on, because it seems to me that the Labour Party wants some essential things like the customs union, the single market, rights for workers and consumers. It seems to me that this has got web feet like a duck, it's yellow like a duck, it quacks like a duck. It's a duck. And the only thing that, in fact, by going for a European economic area is that we lose the influence that we would have if we were inside the market. And that's the thing that I want to get through to the Labour.
Has anyone changed their minds? A couple of you have changed your mind. Yes. Second area.
Yes, I changed my mind on the basis that I don't think the EU is capable of acting as one combined entity. It talks about ever closer liaison between countries, but when put to the test, as it was during the refugee crisis, what happened? Everyone closed their borders. The Germans said, come in. The Eastern European members said, go away. The Italians and the Greeks shouted, help.
So you would now vote out, would you?
I would vote out, because what happened then was everyone in Brussels hid in the cupboard until it had gone away.
Right, but that happened before the vote.
It doesn't matter, it was an ongoing process, and it informed my thinking.
Madalena, what would you say to people who've changed their minds?
I think that changing your mind over one single issue is completely missing the bigger picture. The EU is one big. It's a peace project. It's about economic growth. There's so many reasons to remain that I think quite a lot of people don't actually know about, and I think that quite a lot of the Leave voters voted without sort of a lack of understanding about what the EU actually does. Because
is it only Leave voters who voted in ignorance?
No, a lot of Remainers.
It was everyone, wasn't it?
There is a lack of education in this country because we do not properly publicise where EU funding, where EU projects.
Vera.
I think people should have the right to change their minds, Leaver or Remainers. If you put out the arguments there, we should be confident that the electorate, that people will make a good decision. I'm confident that people will make the good decision. Currently, I'm not confident that we are getting a great deal because everything seems to be car crashing here. We don't even know what the deal will be at the end. A transition is actually only acceptable for the European partners if we know what we want to transition into. It's not a dithering period, it's a transitional period.
Hasn't what we've heard so far shown a huge vacuum of leadership on your side? I mean, your old leader, Nick Clegg, is out today saying people should join the Labour Party or join the Conservative Party, join any political party to fight
Absolutely.
Brexit.
It is a cross-party thing that we have to get going here, because I do worry about the young people. I've got 4 young children myself. I want them to do well. I don't want this country to do badly, but I worry if we leave the EU, it will be a long-term decline. We'll slide into it, and only in 10 years from now will we say, oh my God, this was maybe not such a great idea. We need to stop it. There's an urgency.
Vera, you do know that your own party, you said very interestingly that you thought people had the right to change their mind, and I see you nodding in agreement. You do know that your own party is campaigning vigorously in Scotland to prevent people from having a second referendum on the grounds that they have no right to change their mind. Okay. So I think we need a bit of intellectual coherence here from the listeners.
That's interesting to talk about Scotland, but I want to come back to this man who says he's changed his mind since the referendum. What is, in my view, what's happened since the referendum, if you forget about the difficulties of the talks and the Conservative Party tearing itself to pieces, but the big thing that's happened...
Sorry, can you stop scaremongering?
The big thing that's happened, in my view, the big thing that's happened geopolitically since the referendum is we've had 5 terrorist attacks on British soil this year. We've had Donald Trump being elected in the...
What's that got to do?
We've had Donald Trump taking America out of the pact to try to stop global warming. What this means, in my view, can I finish this? What I think this means is that we are in a more dangerous world than we were. And
I would like to know.
Let me come to this
what made
lady
you
here on the front row.
Remain in the first place? Why did you vote Remain in the first place?
What do you think of what you're hearing?
Hugo was hinting at something about climate change there, and I think something Madeline was saying earlier is, we haven't really been given the chance to understand what the EU does for us. Nobody's ever told us those stories. Nobody's ever really been brave enough to talk about the benefits of economic migration, to talk about the benefits of freedom of movement, about people living, working and loving in other countries. No one's been brave enough to talk about environmental legislation or human rights.
Let me just ask you in the last minute, do you feel you're winning this argument as Remainers or losing it?
Winning.
You're winning it?
Yes, we're winning.
What makes you say that?
As we move forward, what's happening is that the whole process is unravelling. We're seeing the lies that we're told disappearing in smoke. We've seen our MPs, who I'm hugely disappointed in, all saying we want to remain, yet herding like sheep through the lobbies. We're seeing...
Gentleman in the back there in the check shirt.
Some of the attitudes that have been displayed here today are completely defeatist. We have the chance to remain an internationalist, outward-looking country. You don't want the negotiations to go well, so you think they aren't going well. I vote to remain. I don't like what has to be done. I'm under no illusion there is a bumpy road ahead, but my loyalty remains with my country first and foremost, and we will remain international if we want to.
Right next to you.
A lot of people in this room need to think seriously. Remainers didn't just lose the referendum. The 2 parties most pro-Remain, the Liberal Democrats and the SNP, both did quite badly in the general election. I think people should really think seriously, what are you going to do differently next time? so we're not having this conversation every single year.
Well, to make sure we don't have this conversation every single year, let me thank you all very much indeed for coming. That was a really fascinating conversation. That's it for the debate here on Channel 4 News, but we will keep going now on YouTube Live. Go to the Channel 4 News YouTube channel and join us there. But from all of us on Channel 4 News on television, that's very good evening. So we will carry on straight away now because we remain on air on Facebook and on YouTube. Stephen Kinnock, you listen to this audience and they are pretty fired up. Are they not more fired up than you expected?
No, I mean, one of the upsides of Brexit is that this country has actually started to understand the value that the European Union
But then
our
why are
membership
you accepting
brought.
Brexit as a party?
Because a referendum took place and there is no way of reversing it without a second referendum. And I'd love to hear from all of these colleagues here, do they honestly feel outside the immediate circles that they move in, that there's a big move out there in the country for Remain? I don't feel that. Well, come to my constituency. Come to my constituency, which voted 58-42 to leave, and knock on the doors there and ask the questions there.
Bubble?
Outside the bubble, outside the bubble, it isn't happening. And there's a lot of people. If I could just finish with one final question, a lot of people who voted Remain are saying, I voted Remain, I made up my mind in the last couple of weeks, I didn't feel passionately one way or the other, but I think we have to leave. And the fact of the matter is, it is an exercise in damage limitation. What we have to do is make sure that we leave the European Union in a way that doesn't wreck the British economy, because the Conservative Party, in order to solve an internal spat in its own party, has created a potential crisis.
Are we leaders or followers?
We're Democrats. We're Democrats.
If we are convinced that the EU is one of the biggest peace projects that we've had in history, if we know that on balance, okay, not everything, on balance, the EU has been a force for good, we must make that argument.
When should the second referendum take place? When? Give me a date.
Well, the process of how we're going to do that can be discussed. The process how we get through it can be discussed.
About this time next year. About this time next year.
We need to lead
according to
the
opinion polls that nobody believes anymore.
Let me come to this gentleman here on the end.
We're dealing with a lot of hypotheticals here. Have people's minds changed? What's the position of the parties? Is another referendum suitable? The only way we can move to clarify any of these questions is to have another election as soon as possible, in which the parties put forward their positions on the referendums, on the progress so far, because on the evidence to date, this government ain't going to achieve anything. So we need to put it to a democratic vote through an election.
Yes, just behind you, yeah.
There's very little point in having a second anything if we have the same media treatment as we did last time. Because there are others far more guilty than Channel 4, but it undermines democracy if we have a Leave campaign unencumbered by intelligence or integrity, and a Remain campaign that avoids real talk about vision and values, and if we have a media that presents a party squabble as a national debate. And to repeat that would be unhelpful. That's not what we need. We need a change of heart at almost every level so that we have a genuine debate that engages with values and vision, as some of our speakers have suggested.
Yeah, just here, the gentleman in the jacket.
Yeah, just a question for Stephen Kinnock. What you should have done at the last election is, if you believe in the European project and if you believe that this is an act of self-harm, you should have said, I am not going to vote for this. You would have stood on an election, you would have got elected or not, that would be democracy, but then you could carry on doing your duty to the country, which is to lead and do the right thing for the country and not go and hide behind this will of the people rubbish, because the will of the people was based on lies.
Can I answer that question? I'll say it again. If we had a second referendum, certainly before March 2019, it would have nothing to do. It would have nothing to do with Brexit. But what's the point of me saying I'm against Brexit without saying, and here's the plan for reversing it?
Saying I want to represent people.
Let me just answer.
representing people also means having a cogent and coherent plan to put forward as an alternative. If we had another referendum before March 2019, it wouldn't be about the economy, it wouldn't be about our relationship with the European Union or our place in the world, it would be about the Westminster elite sticking two fingers up at the people. The Daily Mail, the Sun would whip up a jingoistic nightmare and we would lose by more than 4%.
But isn't the truth that Labour's position was very effective electorally in that you didn't alienate all those northern UK seats that you were worried about, but it put party before country because you ended up in a position where you weren't standing up for what you really believed in.
Well, we said that the referendum took place and the United Kingdom has to leave the European Union. That position was clear in our manifesto. And the manifesto said we have to leave the European Union. How much clearer do you need to be? And then we also said...
clarity on the specificities of it.
And then we said we stay as close as possible to the current terms of the single market. It's all in the manifesto.
I think the reality is everybody here is self-selecting because they're in this audience and people feel passionate. I think most of the public don't really know what Brexit means yet. And I think it's yet to crystallise, really, for people. And I think at the moment there's a general sense, I think Stephen's right, there's a general sense that we should give the politicians an opportunity to get the best deal that they can. But if you're close to the negotiations, I spent time in Germany relatively recently talking there to their politicians. They cannot believe how badly prepared our politicians are. We're going to get a truly awful deal, and when that deal is on the table, I think the public mood will change. I might be wrong, but people on the whole tend not to vote against their own well-being. So once they realise how bad the deal is, I think the public mood will shift.
That's what you're hoping for, isn't it, Hugo?
Yeah. Just hoping for it, I think we should work for that. Yeah. And I actually think that talking about another referendum now is slightly putting the cart before the horse. Absolutely. The horse is a change in public opinion. So that's what we've got to work on. And what we've got to work on, and there are lots of arguments. We've got the arguments. The arguments are the dog's dinner that they're making about it. The arguments are the lies. The arguments are that we're already being damaged by things. The arguments, partly what this guest in the room said, is the way that the geopolitical situation is changing, and the positive vision of what we can actually do with the EU to manage the problems and grasp the opportunities of the future, whether it is climate change, whether it is globalization, whether it is Vladimir Putin, whether it is mass migration. The real migration that worries us, or should worry us, are the tens of millions of people who are not moving within Europe, but who are moving within Africa and Asia and the Middle East, etc., etc. And that is where, if we are a leader within Europe, we can actually help grasp those opportunities and manage those problems, rather than becoming a rule taker.
We must leave it there. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time. Thank you very much indeed for all your contributions. Thank you very much to the panel. And that was the second of our Brexit reality debates. We'll see where the argument takes us, and I'm sure we'll be back here very soon. Good night.